The auction yard smelled of dust, sweat, and fear. Men crowded around the wooden platform, shouting prices like they were calling bets at a game, not deciding the fate of a human life. Horses stamped the ground impatiently, chains rattled, and somewhere a man laughed too loudly. Through it all, the Apache woman stood still. Her wrists were bound with rough rope, her ankles chained, yet her posture was straight. Her chin lifted as if she refused to bow even now. Dirt streaked her cheek, but her dark eyes were sharp, alert, watching everything. The rancher had not meant to stop. He told himself that a dozen times. He had cattle to sell, supplies to buy, and a long ride back to his empty land. People were not his business. Loneliness had taught him to keep his head down and his heart guarded. But when the bidding began for her, something inside him tightened. The men jeered, commenting on her silence, her defiance, the way she did not beg. Each laugh felt like a blow to his chest. Before he fully understood what he was doing, his hand rose. The auctioneer shouted the final price. The hammer slammed down. Just like that, the noise shifted. Attention moved on, and she was his. The rancher felt no victory, only a heavy, uneasy quiet settle inside him. He approached her slowly, unlocking the chain from the post. She did not flinch as he led her away, walking beside him with measured steps, as if she had chosen this path herself. They reached his wagon at the edge of the yard. Away from the crowd, the sounds dulled, replaced by wind and distant hooves. He turned to her, already reaching for the knife at his belt to cut the rope. "I bought you to free you," he said gruffly. "You'll go where you want." For the first time, she spoke. "Take me to your ranch," she said, her voice low, steady, carrying no fear. "When night comes." "Tie me up." His hand froze mid-air. He stared at her, unsure he had heard correctly. "That makes no sense." She stepped closer, the chains whispering with the movement. Up close, he saw scars on her wrists, not fresh but remembered. Her gaze never left his. "Do as I say," she continued. "Tie me tight, lock the door, and whatever you hear after dark, no matter how close it sounds, do not come for me." A cold unease crept along his spine. He had expected gratitude, anger, maybe silence. He had not expected this calm command, spoken as if she were the one holding the reins. The sun dipped lower, throwing long shadows across the ground. The rancher realized then that buying her had not ended anything. It had begun something he did not yet understand, and might not be able to escape. The ranch settled into an uneasy quiet as night approached. The wind slid across the open land, brushing the tall grass and carrying the distant cry of a nightbird. Inside the small wooden house, the lantern glowed softly, casting long shadows along the walls. The rancher moved carefully, aware of her presence behind him. Feeling it like a weight he could not shake, he offered her food, water, and a blanket, setting them down slowly, as if sudden movement might break something fragile between them. She accepted everything without hesitation. Her hands were free now, yet she made no attempt to leave. She ate in silence, eyes thoughtful, as if listening to something he could not hear. When the last light of day faded from the window, she stood and extended her wrists toward him. "It is time," she said. His chest tightened. "You don't have to do this," he replied. "You're free here." She shook her head gently. "Not yet." The rope felt rough in his hands. He tied it carefully, firm enough to hold, loose enough not to hurt her. Every knot felt wrong, like a betrayal of his promise. Yet she watched his hands closely, as if measuring his intent rather than his strength. When he finished, she met his eyes, studying his face with a depth that unsettled him. "You are different," she said quietly. "That is why this place matters." Before he could ask what she meant, she stepped into the small back room. He closed the door, locked it, and stood there longer than he meant to, listening to his own breathing. Finally, he forced himself away, sitting near the fire with his rifle across his knees, telling himself this was only a strange request from a woman who had suffered too much. Then the sounds began. At first, they were barely noticeable. Soft murmurs carried through the wood, rising and falling like a slow rhythm. The words were unfamiliar, ancient in tone, spoken with a steady intensity that made the lantern flicker. The air felt heavier, charged, as if the night itself had leaned closer to listen. Shadows twisted along the walls, stretching in ways that made no sense. The rancher stood, heart pounding. Every instinct screamed at him to open the door, to cut the rope, to end whatever this was. Then he remembered her warning. "Do not come near me." The chanting grew stronger, then stopped abruptly. A sharp sound followed, the snap of rope fibers tearing apart. Silence flooded the house, thick and absolute. He did not move for a long time, staring at the door as dawn slowly crept across the horizon, unsure whether what waited on the other side was danger, truth, or something far beyond his understanding. Morning came quietly, as if the land itself were holding its breath. Pale light slipped through the window, revealing dust motes drifting in the air, and the fire reduced to grey embers. The rancher stood from where he had spent the night, stiff and exhausted, his eyes never leaving the closed door. The silence, after the chanting, had been heavier than any noise, pressing on him until sleep had been impossible. At last he reached for the latch. The door opened without resistance. Inside, the room was unchanged, no signs of struggle, no broken furniture, no blood. The ropes lay coiled neatly on the floor, severed cleanly as if cut by something sharper than a blade. She stood in the center of the room, unbound, her posture straight and steady. There was a difference in her that was impossible to ignore. Her eyes seemed clearer, brighter, carrying a calm, strength that made the small space feel suddenly too small to contain her. "You kept your word," she said softly. He swallowed. "I didn't know what else to do." "That was the test," she replied. She stepped past him into the main room, sunlight touching her face. Only then did she begin to speak of what the night had truly been. She told him of an old burden passed down through her bloodline, a ritual of release meant to break chains placed by fear, cruelty, and possession. It could not be done alone. Another had to hold power over her, and then choose restraint, choose mercy. Many men had claimed strength. None had proven it. "You did not come when fear called you," she said. "That is rare." The rancher listened in silence, pieces falling into place. The auction, her strange demand, the warning, it had all been deliberate. He had not bought a captive. He had been chosen as a measure of character. The realization unsettled him, yet it stirred something warmer beneath the unease. "I never wanted to own anyone," he said. She met his gaze, something like a faint smile touching her lips. "That is why you were worthy to set me free." The day unfolded differently after that. She helped him tend the horses, moved through the land with familiarity, speaking to it as if it listened back. The ranch no longer felt empty. The long silences were no longer heavy, but shared. When evening came, they stood together watching the sun dip behind the hills, the sky painted with fire and gold. "I will leave when I choose," she said at last. He nodded. "And until then?" "Until then," she replied, resting her hand briefly over his. "We walked this ground as equals." For the first time in years, the rancher felt the weight of loneliness lift. He had thought he was freeing a stranger. Instead, entrusting her darkness and respecting her strength, he had found something he never knew he was missing: connection, purpose, and a future no longer bound by silence. The days that followed settled into a quiet rhythm, yet nothing felt ordinary anymore. The rancher noticed it first, in the small things, the way the horses no longer startled at sudden sounds, the way the wind seemed to move more gently across the land. The woman rose early each morning, greeting the sunrise with a stillness that felt like respect rather than habit. She no longer carried the guarded tension of a captive or a traveler waiting to leave. Instead, she moved with intention, as if every step had meaning. He found himself watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, not with possession or expectation, but with curiosity. She spoke little of her past now, yet her presence filled the spaces that loneliness had carved into his life. When she did speak, it was often about the land, where water once ran, where fire should never be lit, where the ground remembered sorrow. Strangely, she was always right. One afternoon, a storm rolled in without warning. Dark clouds swallowed the sky, and thunder cracked so close it rattled the windows. A young horse broke free from its pen, panicked by the noise, and bolted toward the open plains. Without hesitation, she ran after it. The rancher followed, heart pounding, rain soaking through his clothes as lightning split the horizon. He found her standing in the downpour, one hand resting on the horse's neck, murmuring softly in her language. The animal stood calm, trembling but still, as if listening. When she turned to him, rain streaked down her face, yet her eyes were steady. "Fear spreads when it is chased," she said. "It fades when it is understood." That night, as the storm passed and the earth drank deeply, she finally spoke of why she had not left. Freedom, she explained, was not only the absence of chains, it was the presence of choice. She could walk away at any moment, but she chose to stay because this place had not demanded anything from her. Neither had he. The rancher admitted his own truth then. He had spent years believing solitude was safer than loss. Loving nothing meant nothing could be taken from him. Yet her arrival had shown him another kind of strength, the courage to remain open, even when the outcome was uncertain. As the fire crackled between them, she reached out and placed a simple cord in his palm, woven from leather and bead. "This is not a bond," she said. "It is a reminder. Power is proven by what you refuse to take." He closed his fingers around it, understanding at last. What began as a purchase had become a meeting of paths. Not ownership, not rescue, but two lives choosing, day by day, to stand unbound beside one another.